A bunch of us are going. You want to come with us? And you just go, okay. And then when it's over, I don't remember which vineyard I was at or why I should like one or the other because I didn't taste anything. And none of it meant anything to me. So why do we suspect that Aunt Gertrude from Alabama is going to be interested in the show I am directing, right? Or even understand it. So, so now we've got a very limited audience. Broadway notwithstanding, that's why a lot of what in my opinion, is a hit on Broadway is pretty much Disneyland. It's let's do a spectacular, let's do a Vegas, something that people are just going, I know I'm going to go, ooh, look at the scenery. You and I want to see Ragtime and cry at the end and know that is changing our lives. Or we care about that. I've seen Gypsy 400 million times, but Audra's doing it this time.
Yeah.
I've got to go see it again. Really? Really? And you can watch the movie, which is a brilliant rendition of it, and get to see the whole thing at home. And you can eat whatever you want and go to the bathroom when you feel like it.
Yeah.
I mean, we are stuck on this concept that we're important.
Yeah. Aunt Gertrude says, well, you got money in the show, kid?
Yeah, there you go.
like they said to Sondheim. It is interesting. Like, your family will support you because they're your family. That's also not a given. Like, the reason that they will come is because they are supporting you.
Right.
Unless, one of my friends, he and his wife have a subscription at Ensemble Arts here in Philadelphia, the Kimmel Cultural Campus. I wouldn't really peg him as a theater person. However, he has seen many shows with me over the years. But I think his wife loves theater enough to have a subscription at Ensemble Arts. So they go to Broadway at the Academy. And it's interesting. They are comfortable. They are comfortable, I would say. I also think it's interesting that they skipped over every theater company to be subscribers to Ensemble Arts. When, there is a theater in their neighborhood, there are theaters that are way more accessible and way more affordable. But, they like musicals. Okay, they like musicals, but there's also Walnut Street Theater here, who produces musicals primarily. It's just interesting that they chose Ensemble Arts over one of the other companies. And this is also a thing that we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to, but we are aware of. Like, there are companies at their size, they are reaching a regional market, whereas we're reaching our neighborhood and wherever our zip codes, from wherever our mailing list zip codes take us.
Right.
So we're being very selective, prodding into the main line, into New York City and so on, like where people are. And it's like we're skipping over people whose like proximity might justify them considering supporting us. It's just
but see, again,
so
you're
interesting
talking and when you say supporting, see, here's the problem. For me, the first thing is, why do I want to go there and see whatever is there? Which usually it's because a show is something I've heard I should see or someone's taking me. Unfortunately, nonprofits have very limited runs.
Yeah.
And so by the time the word gets out, the show's almost over.
Yep.
Which is why everyone hopes to have a subscription base. So if you're going to have a subscription base that's just coming regardless of what you produce, and they're just going to show up, one, you don't want to disappoint them when they show up. That's important. But for the most part, why should they go and pay money up front for something they're not excited about in the first place? because you can certainly, and I don't want to use Wicked again, in any major motion picture, they will start promoting weeks ahead,
Yep.
right? And they will hopefully get you excited enough that when you say, okay, it's Friday night, I feel like going to the movies, you'll say, ah, I heard about this one. That's the one I'm going to go to.
Oh,
Well, but nonprofit doesn't do that.
yeah.
Nonprofit often will just say, okay, we have a celebrity in a starting role in this piece. It starts 3 weeks from now, and it's only running 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So in that period, I'm going, well, I don't know what I'm doing on which night. And maybe I'll last minute want to do it, but oh, they're charging me $60 or more, and the movies I can go to and see for
Mhm.
$20. So again, you just change your mind and say, we'll go to the movies.
The other thing about the movie theater is that the movie theater, so the movie is being promoted, not the movie theater. But when you go to
Right.
the movie theater is promoting themselves.
Yes.
Before you see the show, they have to let you know that we come to this place for magic. Like the AMC iconic video, promotion with Nicole Kidman. But yeah, before the show starts, you get this introduction to the venue
Not,
that you're in, and they're touting that their technology is top notch. Not
but
that this movie is going to be great.
but another thing, you're in the theater. There are previews.
Hmm.
You get
Of
to
other
see
films. Here's
of
what else
other
we have to offer.
films.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a competition. Theater has never promoted other people's shows.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
and it's one thing, I have gone to theater which has actually had commercials. Drove me crazy that they would, advertising a product or a store nearby. But at the
Well,
same
it's not that they don't promote other shows. They do, only when there is a cross promotion agreement.
yeah, but
Like,
that is so rare. It's not
but in your curtain speech, for example, you're not talking about everything you have to offer and saying, and if you like works like this, you should go down to XYZ Theater, who is producing another play by this playwright or something like that. Like,
well, I have it a step further because let's say you have an educational program at your theater or some other theater.
mhm.
So, what if 5 kids from that camp, a school or whatever you're doing, come in and perform one musical number that they learned during school at before the show starts? All of a sudden, you go, "Oh, I can put a face to that educational program. These kids were adorable.
Mhm.
Therefore, I know that's at this theater." The same thing would be is I know this is very strange, but okay, Theater Exile. What if Philadelphia Theater Company sends over 2 actors to actually talk about their own show
Hmm.
before the show starts? We're talking the show's starting 3 weeks from now, but they come over. Now I understand that's costly. The actors are away from rehearsal. Lots of reasons for us not to do it.
Mhm.
But if we're truly trying to engage an audience, the only thing that engages me is visual and sound together. That someone talking at me, I might as well be watching Sherry Shepherd on television, which is not a bad thing, by the way. I don't mean
Yeah.
to imply, but even Sherry will go, and we're advertising a TV show, and the star is going to be on my show. We're going to talk about it. Theater doesn't do that.
Mm.
Theater just says our next show in March is going to be such and such. Okay, that means nothing to me. I don't know what, I may have heard of the show, maybe I didn't. I don't know what that means. But having an actor walk out and say, I'm in it, I'm actually going to do one musical number,
Yeah.
or the two of us are going to read one page from the show while holding the script that's funny. All of a sudden, I now believe I'm coming back to see someone I already know.
Yeah.
And we don't do that. All we do is talk about ourselves.
And the mission is so inflated for grants that no one is in your theater going, I'm looking to quote the statement that is in your mission statement. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're not here saying, I was looking for a company that checks these boxes. They're,
Nobody.
I mean, and my overall, my general thought of what a company does is not what their mission says.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but also,
Well,
what if you're a company that, like, what if you're a company that has a longevity, has been around for a while, like has the resources to bring like classics to the stage and does that because they know people love that, they're family friendly and so on. So they almost don't even have to explain to you who they are, what they do, because you can see it in their season. This is what they do. Like, I don't know, like I don't know that I know anything specific about the Walnut Street Theater, for example, except I know that they produce musicals on a grand scale. Like, and I know that they do a good job because they have the resources to do that. To create a presentation that we walk away from visually satisfied. Like they're the kind of company that act 2 is going to knock your socks off because it's going to be a grand scene change, and when the curtain comes up or the curtain opens up, you're going to be wowed by that. And
okay.
that's before you realize that they have the capacity to hire the top talent in the region.
Right. So you know that about them. They have a branding.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it comes down to it. So then you say, okay, they're branded, and let's assume they sell out. If they don't, they need more work also.
Mm-hmm.
But if they sell out consistently, then we don't have to worry about them. Now let's go to the theater companies that don't sell out consistently and say, okay, what are you about? And if all you can do is read me the mission statement, and almost every nonprofit theater uses the exact same mission statement because it's a way you fill out a form to get a nonprofit status. It
Mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with what you're actually producing,
Yeah.
right? It's all supposed to be educational. It's not educational, it's entertainment sometimes. You don't, it's usually the artistic director choosing to do whatever plays he or she wishes to do, and has, again, nothing to do with the mission statement per se. So, how can you tell the difference? I'm going to use New York here. We have the Public Theater, Manhattan Theater Club, Roundabout Theater, and Second Stage Theater. Those are four very rich primary nonprofits in New York. How can I tell the difference? The truth is, they all put on commercial theater. They also take some risks now and then, and they all have more than one space to perform in. Okay, so why do I choose one over the other? I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I
Yeah.
wait and see if the show gets a good review and if I want to see the show. And that to me makes them commercial theater.
Yeah.
So how come they have nonprofit status?
Because there isn't one owner.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. Um,
It
so
is. Oh, and so yeah, that's interesting too. Okay, so you're a nonprofit because nobody wants to own this theater,
well,
right? Okay.
the theaters, you're talking about theater institution,
Yes,
right?
like
Yeah,
no one owns the institution. Um, yeah, but then it is interesting. I mean, like when I was at NYU, in the arts administration program, they kept talking about how nonprofit is a failed business model. And we know that, and we're still not trying to make it any better.
right.
And the thing is, like, I think about it all the time. I'm just like, part of the reason I started Emory and Rep Radio pulled away from Represented Theater Company is because I I was like, I don't know if I want to be dependent on grants to do this. I want to be able to have these ideas, see what it takes to bring them to a, a state of reality, and then help it find an audience. But also don't want to be beholden to the limitations of a grant, because the grant, they're looking for something specific, and I'm trying to shoehorn myself into it, what they're looking for.
Which, by the way, I had that discussion over a long lunch just with that someone who is a grant writer
Mhm.
and who's development officer for a number of nonprofits that people would know about. She was just saying, yeah, absolutely. The problem is you shoehorn yourself into what the grant requires. I will, without naming the institution, because I
Mhm.
like them. One of them got a grant that said, we will support your entire season, but every show has to have this element of our social interest in
Mm.
it. And that means you can only develop shows that have a touch of this.
Mm.
So they had 5 shows they wanted to develop, and they couldn't produce any of them because they had no money except the grant money that told
No.
them what they had to do.
Yep.
And that had nothing to do with the mission of the theater company.
Hmm.
So, again, which is why my organization, The Farm, um, is not nonprofit. We are for profit. We have investors because at this point we are just trying to create and develop good theater. It's a risky thing because we know most shows fall apart. And by the way, let me promote our website is not under The Farm. It's under
WeGrowTheater.com.
We Grow Theater, wegrowtheater.com.
Theater ER.
Yes, Theater
Yeah.
ER. All again because of the phenomenal producer Joe Papp, who on day one said, "You will be fired if you spell theater RE in my theater." It,
Really?
it was that clear. We were told that by every. You do not ever. Now that was him. Different people do different things in America. I've had this discussion with my publisher who said, why does some chapters you have RE for theater and some chapters you have ER? And I said, because theaters are named RE and you want to name them correctly. And they're usually Broadway theaters, British theaters, but many nonprofits term ER. And if you look it up in the dictionary, you can use ER for the generic theater. So
Mm.
sometimes you use one, sometimes you use the other. He said, no, you must choose one. I said, no, you're wrong. And luckily I won.
and
So in the
everybody has their own sort of logic about it too. Like
right, that's
I
right.
I always thought, I always said, like, I don't know. It's like, because I've seen theater RE as the program, the educational program at a
Uh,
university, but I've also seen it ER as a course of study.
well, certainly, just to be clear, the physical building,
Hmm.
which came from London but is on Broadway, they're all RE.
RE, yeah.
The physical building, the institutions, and the generic industry is often ER.
Mm.
And then you have to look at the regional theaters. They do, some of them do ER and some of them do RE. That you just have to look up.
Yeah, I know. Used to have to, you didn't have to pronounce it, or you always quote, spell the fancy way.
Yeah.
Spell the
For,
fancy way. Yeah.
well, so a little off topic, getting back to, so my argument for nonprofits, and of course they're not asking me, are they? Um, is you need to brand yourself, in my mind, visually and orally, for me to know you exist as an institution.
Mm.
So that means I don't know how you do it, but just telling me, sending me an email that says, we have an educational program, or we have a wonderful show coming up. That does not make me want to go.
No.
Now, I understand they can't afford to make a commercial, that they can't necessarily have a dance number on there. That I don't know what they can do with their budgets, but you need to reach me as an audience member either by saying, I've got Hamilton and you're going to want to see it
Mhm.
because it's a great show. And then I hear word of mouth it is and I run to see it. But that doesn't get me to the institution. That just gets me to see that show.
Mm.
Um,
You
by the
know,
way, I just want to add, I do know that the public theater, well, actually, I better not say it this way. There are theaters that will say, buy a subscription because the third show in our subscription is such and such, and it stars this person, and you will not be able to get a ticket unless you're a
Mm.
subscriber. And that makes people buy the whole season. That's just not right.
Yeah, but you're also saying the rest of our season's trash, but stay for the third.
Thank
Stay
you.
for the third show of the season.
Right. That's exactly right. And then you end up, and I've seen it, with a bunch of empty seats for
Yep.
the other shows.
Oh yeah, I got in not an argument, but I had this back and forth with uh, a subscriber from the past season who didn't want one of the shows of our season, but was trying to get a subscription at the beginning of the season. And so I just said, we're currently selling the entire subscription. And they said, yeah, well, I don't want that second show. And I said, okay, well, it's a flex subscription. So you can't break it down. We don't sell a different flex until after the main show has left the stage. And it was interesting because they wanted to be a subscriber so bad, but they didn't want the show that was included in the subscription. And I was like, you can use those tickets for anything. It's a flex subscription. And
Right.
still wasn't.
So you couldn't just say, then just don't go to that show and go to something else?
I know, like she also had a they also had a comp to come back to another show. And so I was like, well, it sounds like you don't want to be a subscriber. You already have a comp, so pick that for the first show and then just buy the second show. I mean, buy the third show. And they were like, no, but I want to be a subscriber. And I'm like, but the subscription includes the whole season. And we weren't doing anything with that middle show to like entice people. It was just that's where it was. We want to open strong. We want to close strong. You know, the second show in the season was a not a leap, but it was like an introduction. You know, it wasn't. We couldn't open the season with it because it wasn't going to be that much of a draw, but it wasn't something we wanted to let go of. But even so, that's something that you have to explain. You have to find a way to explain, to be like, here's everything we're going to do. I also think it's just so tricky that we're trying to find so many ways to entice people to get a subscription instead of just saying like a subscription is still very limiting. Like you're only going
Uh-huh.
to walk into the building when your subscription allows you to. And so it is limiting and it cuts you off from the rest of what the company has to offer as well.
Right.
And
Well, and that's for those of us who, just because of being in the industry, we never know where we're working.
yeah.
Buying a subscription is an impossibility because I don't know I'm going to be in New York
Mhm.
when that subscription has a show. So it's the savings isn't worth it to
Yeah.
me.
Oh, I also wanted to point out, what about a smaller company who maybe produces a show here and there? Like we have a lot of small companies who only produce in the Fringe Festival, you know,
Right.
or yeah, they're only part of festivals. Um, and so like in a way they have to do some kind of branding, whether the branding is like, we always produce a show in the Fringe, or our our shows have an element of movement that you may not have seen in previous productions. Something like there has to be a way that's like that. But I think
I don't think it's possible. I can't see a single reason to not just wait and see what they're producing and then
Hmm.
decide if I want to go.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, first of all, whatever they say they're going to do doesn't mean that's what they're going to do,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't know what someone presents to them that is of interest to them. And they are doing what they're interested in, not what you're interested in as an
Hmm.
audience member, right? And they just have to kind of overlap. Hopefully, you'll be interested in what they're doing. So um, that just doesn't make any sense,
I
you
was
know.
thinking about. I was also thinking about like organizations like Cirque du Soleil.
Hmm.
There is something you can expect from a Cirque du Soleil show because they are arguably an elevated carnival, you
Right,
know,
right,
an elevated spectacle that is reminiscent of a carnival or a circus.
right.
It's a circus, Cirque du Soleil. Um, but the thing is, like, you don't necessarily walk in knowing anything about this show per se, because if a new show comes to your town and you haven't seen it, you'll just think like, I know what they produce, and I haven't seen this one, so
But
I'll
see,
go
but
see this one.
but then that's an issue. Then that becomes branding, and only
Yeah.
if your company is truly restricting itself to a particular type of show.
Hmm.
So just like you said, Walnut Street does musicals, you know that.
Hmm.
Regardless, if you don't like musicals, you're not going.
Yeah.
And if you love musicals, you're willing to try something out. So, how does a theater company that doesn't do musicals say, oh, we're going to take all of our shows are going to be heavy dramas or are only comedies? They never do that.
Hmm.
So, there's no branding to be had, right? I mean, it's just, quote, it just, listen to me, it's just theater. It's
Yeah.
drama. Some of them can be 3 hours long. Some of them could be 90 minutes. Some of them can be. I just got an ad today for an original show that's 70 minutes long. I don't want to pay full price for 70 minutes. That's a TV show,
Hmm.
just live on stage. I mean, obviously, if it's brilliant, I will sit through anything,
Yeah.
right? But then I'm going to wait to hear it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I made the mistake, and it was a mistake. Last night, I went to don't ever want to say something bad about a really good theater company. I went to I was invited free of charge to a brand new show that I was told had music and dance in it. There was a kind of musical, and it was reasonably short, but it was free. And it was also only a block away. So I figured, good combination. I'll check it out. What a piece of junk. There wasn't a purpose. There wasn't a mission. The talent was eh. It had no. I don't get it. And yet, I mean, it's not like I was bored through the whole thing because there were interesting people on stage, but this was like a waste of time. And who are these people? So now I've got to worry about that theater company, right? The
I-
next time they invite me, I'm going to
yeah.
want to know more. It was torture, and it was only an hour and 15 minutes long, and
Yeah.
it felt like torture. That's not good.
Yeah. It's also, yeah, this presents so many questions. Like, one of my friends who sees a lot of theater like I do, on the other side of the pandemic, we were talking and said, I'm going to be more selective about what I go to see. And it's interesting, like, why weren't we so selective before? Like, what was the error that prompted us to feel like everything was not to be missed, or that we had to have some sort of experience about it? You know, like, I
No,
feel like we had an embarrassment of we had not an embarrassment. We had an abundance of theater to see before the pandemic. And maybe it was pricing. Maybe the pricing wasn't so high, and so it was easier for us to just like, this is going to be my thing. This is how I'm going to entertain myself. I'm just going to go to a show, and then I'm going to take it all in, and I'm going to walk in as a blank slate and walk out, entertained. But we're not doing that now, and we keep saying that everybody's overwhelmed with all the options they have, but there's no way I would just, you know, marathon a TV series over seeing a piece of theater that I wanted to see.
Again, that's the industry is for the people in the industry.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Mhm.
I today a 25-year-old asked me if I had seen 3 movies. I had seen none of them, but I could tell him I saw almost everything that's on Broadway.
Yep.
And the movies were streamed, so I could have watched them for free.
Hmm.
And the Broadway cost me a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, I think we first have to come to the realization that, and I'm actually going to take us back, forgive me, to the 1950s, by the way, which is not my era. Okay, just so we don't date myself going back that far. The 1950s hit shows lasted a year and a half. They weren't Cats and 35 years of Phantom of the Opera. That never happened. So for a year and a half, it was because the only people going were New Yorkers, Connecticut, New Jersey,
Mm.
that cared about seeing theater. It was elitist,
Mm.
even if not everyone was rich, because I did sit in the last row when in the 60s and 70s, because you had to buy the cheap seats to see it. But for the most part, it came down to um, the people going were already addicted to theater. Then Disney came around, and it was a Disney thing. And they said, oh, we can bring in a much larger audience because they understand the branding of Disney. And they were right. And all of a sudden, Broadway became not just a tourist attraction for a special occasion, but now it became a popular
Mm.
tourist attraction. And now all of a sudden, people would come to see Cats and A Chorus Line and Phantom and Wicked over and Hamilton over and over and over again. And they were willing to spend big money. That was something that did not exist when I was a little kid.
Mm.
So we have changed the landscape. So now, is Broadway for the tourist? I mean, this doesn't mean the rest of us won't go, but I know in the early days of statistics, we were taught that there were enough people in the New York tri-state area to keep a show running for 3 months, sell out for 3 months, and that was it. After that, you either found the tourists or your show had to close.
Mm.
That's assuming you can get everyone in the tri-state area to want to go,
Yeah.
right? So if you had a Long Day's Journey into Night, which is a heavy, heavy drama, but it starred Colleen Dewhurst, and you wanted to see it, that might get some tourist attraction. You could run it for a little while.
Mm.
A show like Equus, because it got such phenomenal reviews, that could run 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
But those were very rare.
Yeah. And
Um,
if my question always is, because we're so, let's just say we're clouded by this thought that we're the best industry there ever was, you know. But if we got out of this bubble we're in, would we remain in the theater community? Thinking about
um, that's a good question.
the people who happen into our community every now and then, they have so much more going on in their lives. And there's a lot of people in the theater community who just only breathe theater.
Yeah.
And I think this is why our thought about theater is a little skewed, because this is all we see. But everyone on the outside of this sees everything else as well. Like they might like a couple of these shows and they might come to them, but their passion is elsewhere, but it does allow them to sort of dabble in this. Like sometimes your passion is theater and you can't see anything else.
I think you also, God, that first question that you brought up, I'm thinking I directed a show in Wisconsin a long time ago. And I was told the first day I got there, you must go to the local high school. It's the best production of, and I'm not going to mention the show, but the best production we have ever had in the community.
It was
And that,
Oklahoma.
no, it was not far from it. And I went with some of them because it's a nice way to get to meet everybody. I I was falling asleep every 5 minutes. It was horrible. And so my thought is, if I lived in that community, would I never go to theater? What profession? Now, certainly if you live in Wisconsin and go to the Guthrie, of course I'd be going. If in Louisville, the Actors Theater of Louisville, I'd be there all the time. So I'm not saying you have to be in New York or Philly or DC, but it is about, for theater folk, about seeing something that's impactful and extremely well done. So with talented actors who understand what they're doing, that's problematic. Could I give up theater if all of a sudden I had to live in some rural town in Wisconsin? I think I might.
I
That's a
mean,
really hard thing to conceive
when
of.
you think about it, like, and I've said this before, it's kind of like being in the military. When you step out of the military and you're a civilian again, it's hard to not it's hard to not miss being in the military because you are part of something, and it's it's all consuming. And I feel like that's what theater is for us as well. Like it's so consuming us that if we were to let go of it, we feel like there's something wrong with us. Like, what am I missing? Like, what happened to me? I used to be, like I feel like a lot of people who pursue theater, like maybe you pursued theater because it was fun, and so you got that in your college program. You knew you were going to learn stuff, but you were also going to be able to play on stage, and so you did that. And then you get to a point where, like, oh, I wanted to get married and have children, and I can't do that making $300 a show. And I still have to have 2 part-time jobs and learn my lines and be present for this. There's a part of you that says, like, I love this. I love doing this, but there's a lot of people who've never been adequately compensated for anything in this
Uh,
business.
and that's why I call it an addiction.
Yeah.
There is something both phenomenal and very sad about it. How many, and talk about the dancing community, they make even less than actors. So,
And their work is stellar, just
and
stunning every
do,
time.
do you know how many dancers I know over the age of 50 who have a belly and now and don't take care of themselves and are having knee operations, just like sports figures. It's like at a certain point you go, my career is up. I'm 35,
Yeah.
or God forbid you make it to 40. Actors have to decide that if they have to take care of their family. It's part of the reason why some successful actors, because they marry a spouse who has a regular job and can keep the household going while they try to explore, how do I get my first TV show?
Yeah.
How do I get my, stay on Broadway? How many people I know had a Broadway show, ran in it for 2 years, thought they were moving on to the next show. The show closes overnight and they don't work again for 5 years. How do you tell yourself that's okay?
Yeah. And still feel like everything you've trained for is still there,
Right?
There's a lot of people who feel like they're out of practice and they're like, I can't do it anymore. Yes, you can. This is muscle. Like, you won't forget this. If you were having a conversation with someone who's not a theater person, and you've been out of work for the last 5 years, you're still the expert in the room.
Oh yeah, there's no question. Not
Yeah.
only that, you bring something different with your age experience to,
Hmm.
you know, because there are plenty of actors who have no training, who
Yeah.
are natural actors, and there are others with tremendous training who aren't that good. It's not a direct correlation.
Hmm.
It is called talent, and I'm finding that a lot of the interesting people I meet who are I'll no longer call them talent. It's creative. They are actors, singers, dancers, but they're also painters,
Hmm.
or some of them are even gardeners, but they have a very creative touch with
Hmm.
gardening.
There's a
I used
lot of people like that. Yeah.
Right, and I like to think of the fact that when I was managing, I was a creative manager. It was problem solving
Hmm.
every day and solving it in very creative ways that are not found in a book or in a classroom.
Yeah.
You had to discover ways to solve a creative problem for somebody, sometimes without money,
Hmm.
and sometimes because you had money. You still had to solve it, and you had to solve it in a very quick period of time. That's very creative. So, all of those things mixed together. Some people, every actor I know who's been out of work longer than 3 months starts writing their own play. I
Mm.
mean, let's go crazy here. There are too many plays out there and people who have no training in playwriting. However, there are people with innate talents. And sometimes, I again, the shows that we've been developing with the farm, we have some people who could barely put a sentence together. But when you read their play, you go, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm excited. So, okay, we can fix the grammar, but I'm excited. They know how to tell a story, and a special story that actually can change us as an audience. So you don't want to discount that. On the other hand, other people who, I'm a good actor, let me write a play about me.
Mm.
Who cares, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what to tell people. Let's go back to, what do we tell the institutions? I
Hmm.
think we have. We're trying to, uh, in everything we talk about, I just talk about how an institution solves their identity issues.
I think, well, I mean, they have to pull their team together and realize that they've lost sight of their mission, if that's the case.
Well, if the mission is even clear, and
Yeah.
like I said, most missions are written just to fill out a form.
Hmm.
No one has really thought about it.
And or maybe it's not change their mission, but ask, are they are they speaking to the urgency of the conversation of today?
And or is, if you were not, well, let's even just stay with the industry. Are you speaking to the other people in the industry that makes you important to them?
Hmm.
Then maybe that might translate to people who are not in the industry.
Yeah.
But if you don't talk to the people who already love theater, and if you're not saying my show or my company or our activity is special for you, you people in the industry matter to us, and we're going to prove it by our actions. That may translate, it may not. But
Yeah.
if all you're doing is putting on a show, oh, just go commercial. Put on one show and shut up.
That
You know?
is kind of true. Yeah.
Oh, only kind of.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you're the one who's listening, saying, "Me and my friends want to start a theater company,"
Ah,
uh, you know, I know this sounds discouraging, but the thing, we're just basically saying, like, you have to have a purpose. Like, why do you want to do this? And it's
it's
not enough
because
if you're.
the only answer is because no one will hire me to do it. And that's the reason 99% of theater companies get started.
Mm.
I would like to do a bunch of shows. I'm a creative person, and no one's hiring me and saying create a show. Therefore, I'm going to do it on my own. Let's create, get a bunch of friends together, and put on a show. That's a bunch of crap. And unfortunately, 99% of us, I'm as guilty as anybody. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, if you are a story if you are a storyteller, perhaps creating an infrastructure where your stories live, could be a reason. If you want to carry forward, knowing that you're creating original works of your own, yeah, as a company, like you could function as a company who only produces when you write a show, but you're also wondering if that show is going to resonate with anyone.
Well, and name me one company that does that.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying, like, you have to think about it. If this is what you want to do, like, yes, we do have many stories. 4 or 5 kids sitting at a table in college decide they want to start a company because one of them's a stage manager, one's a director, one's a playwright, and one's an actor who can't get work. And so they all come together and they build an infrastructure that they can learn and grow in, arguably. Um, but then you put the nonprofit tag on it, and now it needs to be supported by the community.
That's where the trick is. And don't get me wrong, I think coming out of college or when you're younger, that's exactly what you do because that is more important as an educational tool to get you into our industry than going to class.
Hmm.
You are learning both the business, the creative, the collaborative nature. You are creating something. I
Yeah.
am 100% in favor of it, even though it sounds like I'm making fun. The
Hmm.
problem is it's not sustainable. And when you get to grow up and be an adult, it's not an excuse for a nonprofit theater.
Yeah.
It is good education, and everybody should do it to learn their craft.
So I would say, for an organization who has a branding issue, you have to get your whole team together and remember why you're an organization to begin with. Like, why you started.
Yep.
Look back on your past successes and see where you are today. And also, if you were to start a nonprofit today, what would be the reason? And so it's not just my company is 30 years old. It's like, okay, and 30 years ago, it may have made sense to start this company, but the company is still here. And is the company still relevant? And that just because you have a handful of subscribers doesn't necessarily mean you're still relevant. You are reaching some people who, because of comfort, don't want you to go anywhere. But the the race of trying to find grants, trying to get people to work, and trying to pay people a decent wage, and going through all of that, is it worth it still? Is it still something that your infrastructure as an organization should still be doing? And I feel like the pandemic was kind of like it was like a turning of the mirror to say, like, look at you, the way you are in this situation right now. Can you survive? Can you sustain? Can you reach a community who is also dealing with this?
And that's a great way to end this because we've noticed left and right theater companies closing.
Yeah.
On the positive end, the question is those that will survive this era where we are closing more nonprofits than opening them,
Mhm. Yeah.
will those actually take on the responsibility and the obligation to do something for our community? Or are they just going to try to stay alive and do the same thing they did before? Let's
Yeah.
hope that they move on to the new standard,
Yeah.
right?
So the question we'll leave you is, will your organization thrive in 2025?
Oh God, we had we didn't sing anything from any show today.
I know. I've realized that the last few episodes I haven't brought a jingle in.
Yeah.
But
All right.
yeah, we're just having real talk. But that's the business. of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and we'll see you at the theater.
Bye-bye. You really had to go there, huh?